Bill, tell me about how do your knives start? Where do you tell me about your process?
Well,
if you don't mind.
first process is learning how to draw a little bit. And basically, we always start with a full-size sketch. Make patterns for the blades off the sketches. You have a general idea of what your handle shape and size is going to be, but that's actually where it starts. Yeah. Then from there we go into the grinding area or the buffing area and that kind of stuff. This area out here is for making sheaths. This is the leather working area. You see one we just completed last night.
You take me for a shop tour?
You bet, you bet. Come on in. One of the things I've found over the years and been to a few other maker shops is the fact that everybody has their own idea of what a knife maker shop should be. If you're a machinist, you probably lean more to that type of equipment. If you're just a knife maker like I am, you start off with steel cutting bandsaw, grinders, lots and lots of belts, buffers. You wind up with a finished knife, hopefully.
I got a bunch of knives here. Are these been heat treated?
Those are some that have been rough shaped. They haven't started the grinding process yet. Let me show you. Basically, we start with around here. You start with a piece of raw steel. Lay your pattern out. Now, I'm getting ready to cut this out, and then we'll go to the bandsaw and start cutting it out. But it starts off with just a raw piece of steel.
What is your favorite type of steel to work?
I prefer 154 CPM 154. I use 440, I use D2, and occasionally some Damascus. Once we get the pattern laid out on, you see it's real highly technical here as far as precision is concerned. It's a rough pattern is all it is. And then you go to this, cut it out. From there, it's going to look something like this after it's profiled out. And basically all I do is lay out the center lines on both sides. Then I give myself a rough idea of where my grinds are going to be.
There's no jigs that'll let you grind like that, huh?
No, no. This is all done freehand. And that's something that I've noticed over the years. A lot of people go to a lot of work trying to figure out how not to grind freehand. And some of them have come up with some pretty ingenious ways of doing things. But for me, all part of making a knife is doing it freehand. I use a 3-inch wheel for my hollow grinds. I have an 8-inch, but mostly this jewel right here will do everything I want to do. You notice I've got a lot of grinders here. I started off with the one on the end down here, this old green one. I bought that in 1975, I guess it was, and it's still working. I bought that, this metal cutting bandsaw, and this old drill press were the first pieces of equipment I had. And they're still, trudging along doing what they need to do. So.
All right. So once you got the blade shaped out, you get your hollow grinds done. Then you go to heat treat. Is that right?
I do my own heat treating. The heat treating furnace is in the other building. The nice thing about 154 and 440 and D2, they're all air hardened steel. In other words, you heat them up to a certain temperature and then they just air quench. They don't have to go through a whole lot of, real difficult heat treating process. Some people recommend that they be sub-zero quenched and for increasing edge holding and that kind of stuff. But again, it just depends on what you're going to use the knife for. Then after heat treatment, they come back over here. Let's see, I think I've got a couple here that have been heat treated. Here's a Texas Bowie blade that's been heat treated. It's rough ground down to about 320 grit, and I'll take it on down from 320 to 400, 600, 800, and then 1200. And then after 1200, I can usually start over here on the buffers and come up with a mirror finish on it.
Now, do you take 1200 on the grinder, or is that a hand sanding operation?
No, it's a grinder.
Where do you find a 1200 grit belt? What does that look like?
An outfit called True Grit. But this is a 1200 grit bed. You can see it's just about as smooth as you can get.
Yeah, okay.
But it's a 1200 grit.
Nora, is it a 6 or what is that, 16 or?
16.
16.
X16, yeah.
Okay, uh-huh.
And I like these gator back, what they call gator back belts. They feel real rough if you touch them. Even this 600 grit here feels like it's a lot coarser, but you get a nice smooth satin finish on there, and you can go from there to the 800 and the 1200 grit.
Mm-hmm.
So.
When you're getting to those high grits, you slow the belts down a lot to keep that heat from building up, or how do you,
It depends. These two grinders here, these TW90s, are the first time I've used a variable speed motor. Prior to the old square wheels, I didn't have variable speed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm finding that I can do certain things with a variable speed that I couldn't do before, and so I'm always learning. You know, that's one of the things about it, you always learn.
How do you like Travis's grinders?
Oh, I love it. And of course, they come with all kinds of attachments. He can build you just about anything, including a surface grinder.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, he makes an outstandingly good machine. I bought the first one, and I decided, what the heck? I had a little extra cash, so I decided to go ahead and buy a second one. So I wound up with two of them. Somebody said, well, why do you need so many grinders? I said, well, really you don't. You need one. But it just makes your steps a lot easier, and you know, you don't change stuff around quite as much as you did when you only had one. Biggest expense, of course, is grinding belts. When you're talking $5 to $10 a piece for belts, you see all these hanging on the wall, you spend a lot of money on belts. Mm-hmm. And of course, buffing compounds and all that kind of stuff. So the other tool I think I probably use as much as anything.
Really?
I have 3 of these hanging here, plus one in the other room. And I use the Dremel probably as much as I do a grinder.
Is that right? This is for
especially
handle shaping, or what do you?
Handle shaping and that kind of stuff. Because there's just, all my handles, there's very few of them that have just a flat surface. Actually, none of them have a flat surface. You can see here from the drawing, you know, you've got these curvatures in here and this thing here. A lot of this final work, especially because I can't get in there with one of those big grinders, you do all this with a Dremel. So you spend a lot of time, and you spend a lot of money on a little sanding disc for the Dremel. So, and you get those in 3 or 4 different grits. And of course, files and all the rest of it.
What tool do you think has taken you the most years to get a handle on?
To master? Well, I haven't mastered any of them yet, but probably the grinders. Uh-huh. You know, buffing can be dangerous. You got to be very careful with that. But the biggest thing is, I have a basic rule that I learned a long time ago about knife making. Tony will probably agree with this. It's a lot easier to take a little more off than it is to put some back on. You know? So make sure you go slow and easy, and don't get in a big hurry about, you know, trying to remove too much stock or whatever the case happens to be.
Uh-huh.
When I cut a handle out, I always make it a little extra large. I can always take a little more off, but if you cut it exact where you think it's going to be the exact size, you'll wind up taking off too much and your handle's not right.
Look at this chunk. You
Yeah.
don't mind me showing this off.
No,
Look at this
no,
piece
no.
of desert iron, what it looks like?
Yep, that's what it is.
My goodness, that's a nice piece.
Matter of fact, that piece is going to be for one of those knives out there. And I have all my handle materials down here. You can see I got buckeye, burl, spalted maple, ironwood, ebony, cocobolo, micartas over here, and that kind of stuff. So I try to separate them out and keep a general idea. But of course, there's no 2 pieces exactly alike. All of them are a little different when you get into the natural woods.
Pretty neat.
And then we occasionally, for some of the full tank stuff, I use mosaic pins on some of them.
What percentage of your knives would you say are full tang versus a
10%.
Okay.
No more. I prefer the stick tangs or the narrow tang, just personal preference, but I have 3 different models that are what we call full tang. And one of the things I found about full tang knives is you're spending a lot more money on steel. You just, you know, especially if you have any type of guard or anything like that. You can see this model here, that's a 3.5 inch piece of steel. And when they sell it by the pound, all of this excess winds up on the floor that you're not getting anything for, but you paid for it, you know, when you bought it. And of course, as far as patterns are concerned, like I said, I've got 2 or 3 different patterns that are what I call full tang. But most of my stuff is narrow tang stuff. I make these, I started using plexiglass to make my patterns because I can lay the plexiglass right on top of the drawing, trace it over, and then you've got a pattern for your blade.
Oh, that's nice. Is that, you just cut it out with a bandsaw or with
Yeah, wood cutting bandsaw will cut that out. You rough it out and then you can actually shape it with a grinder, you know, slow it down and just, you know, say an 80 grit belt or something like that, and come up with a pattern. Use a lot of files, a lot of drills. One of the things I found is when I'm making a knife, one of the things I like to kind of state to people is 99% of the operations I do are hand operations. In other words, what I mean by that is either I hold the part or the tool in my hands. Now, the 1% or 10% that I don't is where I'm chucking something up in a vise like this, like the guard, where I drill the holes for the guard. Then I've got this little tabletop mill, and I use it for one thing and one thing only. After I drill the holes for the guard on the drill press, I flip this over and I back cut that so that when I'm filing this guard material to fit the tang, I only have to file about 1/8 of an inch or so to get it perfectly flat so that it fits up against that shoulder. Then this back surface here, after the guard is on there, I backfill this with JB Weld. And then the JB Weld seals everything. You don't have any moisture coming in, but I don't silver solder anything anymore. I silver soldered for years and now I don't. So everything is pressure fit, backfilled with JB Weld, and there's no silver solder joint. So there's one more step there that you don't have to do. Clean up silver solder, you know. And one of the things I've seen over the years, and I'm sure you have too, a lot of people use a whole lot of silver solder to cover up a poor fit on a joint. So, you know, you don't want to do that. You can keep from it. You want your fitting between the guard and the shoulder of the blade to be as close as possible. So it just takes a little extra time. You use those files there and, you know, check it, file it, check it, put it on there, and it'll eventually get to the point where it's as close as you want it.
Say again?
Bead blast cabinet.
Okay, it looks like all right, looks like that.
You got your air compressor and everything. But basically what I'm using, now let's see, we can open this here. Let me show you this. That's almost like a powder. Okay? So you start off with a mirror finish blade and then make it soft finished. Basically, take the shine off of it is all you're doing.
And what is that? What is that called?
It's a ceramic glass bead.
Okay.
But it's almost as fine as talcum powder. So you're not changing the dimensions of the knife. You're not covering up any scratches or anything like that. You know, a lot of people are putting finishes on knives to cover up 240 grit scratches. Well, I guarantee you with that stuff there, you have to mirror finish it first and get rid of all those scratches before you get a satin finish.
Show me what kind of finish that looks like once you've done it.
Okay. I said, now here's an example of a mirror finish. And then after the mirror finish, you take it in that bead blaster or a sand blaster, and that's what it looks like.
It's a smooth knife, huh? 40 years it says.
Yep, last year was my 40th year, so I'm into year 41 now.